I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors over at Jim Dunlop and MXR Pedals. We couldn't be luckier to have these guys on board with us. I personally use these products, and you should too. Find out more about them at jimdunlop.com. Let's get on to the podcast. Hey guys, this is Zach from the Anti-Heroes podcast, and I want to welcome our newest sponsor to the show, DistroKid. DistroKid helps musicians get their music on all the major streaming platforms, and artists keep 100% of their royalties. Can you believe that? Anti-Heroes listeners get 30% off at distrokid.com/VIP/antiheroes. Again, that's distrokid.com/VIP/antiheroes. Thank you so much, and support all the folks at DistroKid because they're doing amazing work, and we couldn't be happier to have them on board. Hello and welcome to the Anti-Heroes podcast with your host, Zach Blair. I am Zach Blair. Hi there, how you doing? This podcast and having the ability to have this podcast and being lucky enough that you people let me have this podcast has afforded me so many things. And I talk about this all the time, that I get the benefit of talking to guitar players that I admire and that I like. But that's exactly what this podcast is. It's guitar players that I like, that I've always liked. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're the guys that are the most popular or been heralded the way I feel like they've happened. So I'm trying to do that right now. Today is one of those that is somebody that I have been a fan of for, 30 years. This is Duane Denison from the Jesus Lizard. And I don't remember the first time I heard the Jesus Lizard. I don't know who introduced me to them, but I do remember what a profound effect it had on me and how I knew that I was listening to something important. I knew that what was going on, it was like they invented a different type of music. There's only a few bands that I feel like have done that. One being Shudder to Think, Craig Wedren. There's nothing really to compare that to. And I believe Jesus Lizard are the same. You know, there's not many bands that get that. And Duane and I get to talk about, you know, the sort of just the indelible mark that a lot of the punk rock guitar players, the true classic punk rock guitar players, guys like John McGeoch or Keith Levine or Geordie Walker, Robert Quine. As you'll hear, Duane Denison, he went to school for this shit. He knows what he's doing, but he still came up with such a compelling voice. No one sounds like Duane Denison. And no one ever has. That's the thing. Another thing that I think is really interesting about that is that usually when you come out and you have done something so original, more often than not, because we are human beings, we admire something so much that we end up just by osmosis, for lack of a better term, copying it. You just add it to your thing and you copy it. I don't think anybody else could sound like Duane Denison. Certainly no one has. I am endlessly amazed by this guy and his band, the Jesus Lizard, which are one of, in my humble opinion, the most important bands of our time, have a new record coming out, which is a reason to celebrate. And I am so honored and humbled that I got to talk to the man. I did find at least 45 minutes worth of things to say to this guy, and I hope you enjoy it. So I will shut up and I will get into my conversation with Duane Denison. Hi, Duane.
Hi, Zach.
We've already talked, but thank you so much for doing this. I love specific players, and you are one of the top 10, or even top 5, I would say.
Oh, thanks.
Of course. So I've wanted to talk to you for quite a while. We've met, we've brushed, but it's always been one of those things where even no matter how long you do this, when I've been in your vicinity, like, what am I going to bring to the table here? What am I going to talk to this guy about? You know, like,
it's fine.
Hey, sir, you know, how you doing? You know, we were just talking I live in Austin, Texas. You did live in Texas. Were you here in Austin?
Yes, I was there from 84 to 89.
Oh wow. Okay. And you played with Biscuit, right?
Played in Cargo Cult for 2 years. We did
Cargo
one
Cult.
album. Yeah, we did one album on Touch and Go. And during that time, we opened for a couple of really great bands, including Butthole Surfers and Scratch Acid. And that's kind of how I met David Yow and David Sims.
Now, are those guys? I never got the straight story on those guys either. Are they actually from Texas as well?
David Sims, I think, is born and raised there. David Yow was an Army brat or an Air Force brat and was born in Las Vegas, but I think he lived in Austin. He lived in Texas for a good while. Like, I'm pretty sure he went to high school there, high school, college, and then the punk rock scene. So,
Wow. That's crazy. I'm in a band that's so defined by being from Chicago. And I think when people think of Jesus Lizard, it's the same thing. Like, oh, they were a
yeah.
Chicago band. But to know that there's so much, you guys sort of all met in Texas and sort of then congregated to Chicago. And you're right about the heat. It is a lot, simply put. Yeah. How does it feel after this whole time to be back at it? You guys have a new record coming out so far. The stuff that you put out is just unbelievable. It's you guys. How's that?
Oh, it's great. It's exciting. We've been playing, we kind of got back together and started playing shows in 2009. And we went around the country, went around the world, really. And we've played intermittently since then, like 2017, 2018, and I think New Year's. But as much as anything, I just wanted to have some new material to play.
Yeah.
Tired of playing the same songs. So the timing was right, and we had no reason not to. Went in the studio, and we had lots of ideas and energy, and we're excited, and did the album. And now we're all just super psyched to get out and play and start playing live and playing a lot of these songs.
Yeah, I bet. It's a weird thing. It's like for us as the players, that's the only thing we want to do is keep playing the new stuff, and then the crowd just wants to hear the old stuff. So it becomes this weird struggle.
I mean, on the one hand, sure, the reason there is a crowd is because of those songs, but you have a certain responsibility, I think, as an artist to be able to do a certain amount of what you want.
Sure.
And actually, one of the shows we played recently, somebody was yelling, "New songs, new songs." It never happens. So, I mean, we've played a lot of those same songs for decades now. And
Yeah.
I've played some of those songs live over 1,000 times. I think hopefully, the album will be out and people will warm up to it quickly and want to hear some new songs.
Absolutely. I went and saw The Cure, and because of The Cure, I guess Robert Smith does whatever the fuck Robert Smith wants to do, and they were there for themselves. They played all new stuff. They would do like 7 brand new songs and then play one of the hits, but they didn't even get to all the hits. And I was like, as a guy that's a performer as well, was like, man, that takes balls, and it's compelling, and it was exciting to me. You know what I mean? But
Yeah,
just the people around me were like, you could see people just kind of visibly shaking their heads, like throwing their hands up.
I think you got to split the difference there. I think throw in a few new ones during the main part of the set and then mix it in with the bangers. Then maybe if you get an encore, if you play too many new ones, you might not get an encore. But then you
It's
come to the
true.
encore and just load it all bangers. I mean, for most of the people, that is why they're there.
I mean, you're right. I mean, and I have to admit that's why I was there.
Yeah,
And of course, I want to come and see you guys in here, Boilermaker. But I want to hear the new stuff. It also depends on how big of a fan you are of that band as well. I
yes.
think. I think ultimately.
I don't know. Maybe I'm fooling myself, but I think we've been around long enough and played enough shows that people will want to hear something other than this year's version of that old song.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure. That makes sense. Well, let's go back a little bit. You're such a discernible guitar player, and it seems like to be a discernible guitar player and to have a voice that is yours, because that's all been done. But no one, in my opinion, has done or did before you what you do. That was not the preferred nomenclature, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Sure.
What informed those decisions? There's such a razor clean sound it was Travis Bean guitars. What I can understand, high watt amps. Maybe later there was
Yeah.
matchless amps. Was that a thought out decision process on your part beforehand, or is that just the gear that you came up with that you acquired and you're like, I'm going to make this work?
Yes and no. I know it sounds non-committal, but so as far as the playing style, because I'm older, I grew up at a time when the prog rock stuff was big.
Sure.
Steve Howe, Steve Hackett, Robert Fripp, Jan Ackerman, those guys, those were the shredders of the day.
Yeah.
And as a teenager, as an impressionable kid, those were the guys I strived to emulate.
I love those
And,
guys.
and everybody in my era, that was it. You didn't, when you're a kid, you don't question things. You just kind of like, those are the good guys, do what they do.
Right.
So, I took lessons and studied and did that and worked on that. But at the same time, I liked glam, I liked Bowie, I liked T-Rex, I liked Mott the Hoople and Roxy Music. So there was kind of a crossover there. Well, then punk rock came along, and that was just so exciting. It was like this subversive subculture of not just music, but art and fashion and everything else. And once you're in on that, there was no going back. So that was that. That's what informed that from musically. And then now sonically, the amp came first. I really liked high watts. I really liked those. They were a little sharper. It wasn't as driven as a Marshall, but it was more driven than, say, a typical Fender amp. And everyone who played them, I liked, whether it was Pete Townsend or Robert Fripp or Martin Barr or any number of people. To me, they were all very distinctive and different. So I knew that's what I wanted. And I had a roommate down in Texas who had one, and I played it, and I was like, man, this is it. Travis Bean's just happened. I borrowed one in the studio that Steve Albini had, and it sounded great, and it felt great, or it felt weird, put it that way, heavy, clunky, not balanced, neck dives.
Yeah.
But it just had a unique sound, and that combination, to me, the Travis Bean and the high watt was unique. I didn't hear anyone else do it, and it was quite different. So I went with that. And keep in mind, too, in those days, that stuff was not expensive. It really wasn't.
Right.
I got a full 100-watt head and 4x12 for $500.
Wow.
I got a Travis Bean guitar, like that, a unique green, like number 276, for $550.
Wow.
So my original rig was just barely $1,000, and that's all. And I had to borrow money to buy that.
Of course.
You know what I mean? So that informed that decision as well. It wasn't like I was trying to be this weird audiophile, thing. It was just I knew that sounded good, and they were readily available. Lots of high watts were pretty common in the Midwest. I saw lots of guys having one. The coast, not so much. I don't know why that is. Maybe it was a distributor. But other bands, Naked Raygun, Pegboy, Material Issue, Poster Children, Tar, all those Chicago things. High watts were everywhere.
That's true.
So that's kind of where that came from. And then, so I tried to throw in sophisticated ideas. I mean, I played classical guitar too, right? Because the prog guys all did that. And I majored in music in college.
Yeah.
And I was able to go to school and get a degree because of the music stuff. So that informed that. But at the same time, I wanted it to be aggressive and pushy and noisy. Well, the post-punk guitar players to me were more interesting. The original wave, you had the Pistols and Ramones and stuff like that. And that was all right, but I thought musically it was a bit regressive. But then by the time you got to, say, Gang of Four and Public Image and Killing Joke and Susie and the Banshees and magazines, suddenly the guitar was different. It was all those guys were doing, to me, much more interesting things. Even Bauhaus or Echo and the Bunnymen, Will Sart, even guys like that, they were doing different things. It wasn't lead or rhythm guitar anymore. It was just interesting guitar.
Yeah.
And so that came and went. And then in America, around the time when the Jesus Lizard started, to me, there was another wave of interesting guitar bands. There was Sonic Youth and Butthole Surfers and Big Black and then Scratch Acid and things like that. So I thought, this is my in. I found my way in, like that kind of music, that scene. I thought, well, this is where I belong. And I kind of got my foot in the door and elbowed my way in.
Which I think was your, the 90s version of those bands that you referenced before. Like, so take someone like John McGeoch, who was Magazine and Susie and the Banshees.
Yeah.
I would say that guy was also influenced by Robert Fripp and by the prog rock maybe even Van der Graaf generator.
Television.
Yeah, and television. Yeah, absolutely. I would say those guys were also influenced by prog rock and weren't doing regressive music, but because of punk rock, it sort of put it in everybody's hands to be like, well, you can do this. You can take your influences and you can still make that some sort of, captivating, interesting thing that with this new movement that you're doing, you can, everything is
Yeah.
under the umbrella, essentially, like a Robert Quine from, the
Yes.
Voidoids.
And I think that taking those ideas that may have been initiated by the prog rock stuff, also what was happening at that time was minimalism, like
Sure.
Philip Glass and Steve Reich and stuff like that, where it was okay to strip things down and make them repetitive and make them rhythmic. And that mentality, that also influenced. And so it was kind of like throw away the excessive, the bombastic excessiveness of the
Yeah.
prog neoclassical stuff. I didn't want to be Yngwie.
Right.
Who did? Jesus. It's like, I can't believe he's still around. Doesn't matter, though. Leave all that behind and just take some of the better ideas and filter it through this new aesthetic of minimalistic and power and doing more things that were rhythmic and dynamic and exciting, make it exciting and fun.
Well, I think that's what stood out about you as a guitar player is like, yes, you were a person like the people we mentioned, like Geordie from Killing Joke or Robert Quine or Mickey Yock. But you could tell there was a musicality thing. There was a knowledge of melody. There's a knowledge of harmony. There was a knowledge of, you could tell you knew what you were doing. It wasn't just, well, I guess I'm just going to make this cool noise, which a lot of the great punk rock guitar players were doing that, and there were no boundaries and there were no limits. You could tell, as a player myself, I could tell that guy knows what the fuck he's doing, but it is influenced and informed by all of these other things. But he's doing it to this, in my opinion, this greater degree because he knows what the fuck he's doing,
Yes, I think that, well, thank you.
Absolutely.
One of the nice things, if you know a little bit, I mean, obviously all the theory and history and composition, this stuff in the world, that's not going to help you if you don't have some inspiration and motivation there. That's not going to help.
Sure.
But there comes a point where all the inspiration and motivation in the world is going to run dry, and you need something there to help you develop those ideas. That's where that other stuff, like you said, knowing what you're doing, where you can say, well, let's see, what do I do now? Well, why don't I invert it? Why don't I invert the intervals of this part I played? Why don't I play it backwards? Why don't I transpose it and cut it in half and transpose it? And, all these little tricks that you can do if you just take the time to think it through a little more.
Yeah. Again, if you know what you're doing. And some people, a lot of people, you don't necessarily have to know, what's right or wrong. Some people just have great ears. And I would probably venture to guess that Geordie from Killing Joke doesn't know his theory, but he came up with this amazing, great thing anyway,
Yeah. But he was working with someone who did, and that was
That's true. That is absolutely true.
He was working with someone who did, and I tend to think a lot of those guitar parts were things that the other guy came up with on a keyboard or something and said, here, why don't you reinterpret this? And he did, and that's part of what makes them distinctive. I think that's part of what was going on.
No, I think you're right, because that was one of the things that blew me away about that documentary. That's if anyone's a Killing Joke fan, it's on Amazon Prime. It's called The Death and Resurrection Show. It's like 3 hours long. It's amazing.
Yeah, I couldn't watch the whole thing.
I'm a dork, so I didn't do it in one setting, but I realized two things. One, that Jazz Coleman is like, he's not of this time period. Like, he is probably from like a Viking era or a Russian czar. I don't know. He's a different animal. But also that he composed music and did, symphony scores and things like that. I had no idea.
Oh, and I've got a couple. I kind of like them. It's not bad.
So that was one thing the main thing I wanted to ask you was just what informed those decisions, because no one at the time or since has sounded like you when everyone was going for more distortion and more lead work or more, downstroke bar chords and sort of, you really cut through. And it's so hard to do something like that when the noise is so literal. The lead noise is so loud, to just go, nope, I'm this fucking player and this is how I'm going to do things.
Yeah. A lot of it had to do with the guys I was playing with who that's what they liked too. I
Yeah.
mean, that's what they wanted to hear too. We were coming from the same place. We had a lot of stuff we liked in common, whether it was like the stuff we mentioned, Public Image,
Yeah.
or Birthday Party, or Magazine, or whatever. And the guitar playing on that, I did not want to be like the typical grunge guy and just cranking up the big muff and hitting power chords. I mean, there's a time and place for everything. And
Sure.
there's sometimes, yeah, you crank it up. And the new album, I'm not particularly clean on that.
Sure.
A little bit here and there, but there's a lot of noise and some effects here and there. But I just happened to be working with people who got where I was coming from and who liked it and appreciated and kind of encouraged that kind of thing. And we didn't want to sound like others. I mean, a lot of times, you define yourself, especially as a musician, you define yourself as much as anything by what you don't do
Right.
as what you do. And that was one of those
It's
things.
true.
And
It's a great way to put it.
right. And so that's kind of where that was coming from.
Yeah. You've mentioned Public Image Limited a few times, and I was actually going to bring that as well. You know, it is. It's like it's Public Image Limited, but it's also Robert Fripp. But was Keith Levine an early influence? Was
Oh, yes and no. Not as much as people might think. When I go back, I can't hardly listen to one of their albums all the way through now.
Yeah.
It gets irritating to me. There'll be a song that I think is great, and then a song where he just sounds like he's just fumbling around and haphazard, and it's not good. And then you've got that vocals, that annoying nasal,
Yeah.
going,
Yeah.
and it does, and especially the songwriting on the earlier, some of it I like, but some of it just seems like, dude, you've been playing this one idea all the way through for 5 minutes. Please, why didn't you sit down and come up with a secondary theme? Come up with a contrasting section. Come up with something. Don't just keep winding it out.
Give me a bridge.
So anything. So yes and no. I wasn't really trying to be like that. I always thought John McGough was more of a craftsman. I thought that the stuff from Magazine and Banshees was so much more detailed and interesting.
Yeah, man. What a player.
Andy Gill, Gang of Four, though he was a bit more haphazard. We did an album that he produced, and I so firsthand got some of that guitar trickery, right there. But once again, you pick stuff you like and discard, throw the rest away.
You glean what works, yeah.
I really think that I always heard McGough and Geordie Walker were, for me, the two of the English ones that I like the best.
That's two of my big ones as well.
But then by the time the Jesus Lizard came around, to me, that stuff, you could reference it, but you couldn't really do that anymore, especially we're in the United States, things are different here. And by the time we came up, you're playing festivals and you're going up against or with, say, Dinosaur Jr. or Soundgarden or things where there was a bit more heaviness and stuff in the air. And if you're out playing and you're playing festivals and things where you're going to be sharing a stage with other bands, you have to kind of bring it a little more, because otherwise it sounds kind of inconsequential. It sounds thin. Or not strong enough, or especially, God, with Tomahawk, I remember I'm the only guitar player, and we're playing with, like, say, the Deftones, and you got 3 guitar players all tuned down, playing through stacks, and it's like, well, here we go. I'm gonna try to keep our head above water.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I think that's what the great thing is about your discernible sound, though. It does sonically chop through whatever distortion anyone's bringing to the table. Your thing it's almost like a different instrument. And that's what was always so compelling about you to me, was like, this guy's doing something totally different, but yet it's still competing with what I guess, quote unquote, punk rock. But in my opinion, punk rock was these bands that we keep mentioning. That was punk rock. And what happened in the 90s and what that, to me, I wish there was another term for what that was. You, to me, are a classic punk rock guitar player, because there was no real definition of what that was.
Right.
It was, you know what I mean?
Yes, in the same way that, say, Paul Leary was.
Absolutely.
In the same way that Jay Mascis was, in the same way that Steve Albini was, where you define your own, you define your genre.
Exactly. That's punk rock.
And you reinterpret it, and I guess I would consider them my peers, as much by period as by just aesthetics as well.
I would do the same thing. Coming from the band I come from, when I started a podcast like this where I was going to talk to guitar players, people thought I would talk to the guys of the 90s of my ilk that I sort of came up with. And I'm more interested in what we've been talking about. And that's why I wanted to talk to people like you or Andy Kerr from No Means No, who
Oh, wow.
I know. He's so elusive, and I got a chance to talk to him. People like that, those were my heroes. I wanted to talk to Geordie Walker so bad, and I talked to somebody that knew him or knew their management. I was getting there, and I met Martin Atkins, and Martin Atkins was like, "Oh, I think I can help you out," because he's, Chicago. Yeah. And and then he passed away. I was like, But those are my guys. You're cool. One of my guys. Those are my guys. And yeah. So then Tomahawk came around, and what was that like after playing with Jesus Lizard for so long? And I know you also did the Denison-Kimball Trio. So you had played with other things, but what was that like musically for you?
Okay, so by the time that started, so the Jesus Lizard kind of stopped in 1999.
Yeah.
And I moved to Nashville. I took a gig playing with Hank Williams III, and that was completely different.
Yeah.
So when he first started, I was in his band for a year and a half, almost 2 years. And so that was completely different. I was ready for a change, and I wanted to do something that was a challenge and different, and that's what that was. So now I'm playing country mixed with cowpunk, mixed with Western swing, mixed with whatever. So I did that. But while I was doing that, I could see that being a sideman, being in someone else's thing, wasn't going to do it. And on the one hand, it was cool. It was a steady gig. We played everything from the Grand Ole Opry to CBGB's to
wow.
We played on TV. We played Annie Leibovitz's Christmas Party.
Wow.
We played with George Jones. We played with Dwight Yoakam, as well as playing weird with, Horton Heat and more, rockabilly kind of stuff.
Sure.
But at the same time, I was writing and stockpiling ideas, and which became the first Tomahawk album. So I met Patton, and he told me, and he said, "Oh man," he said, "I really dig the Denison-Kimball Trio. If you get something good going, I've got a label now, and get a hold of me." So I kind of thought about that, and then I thought, well, I knew he was doing Fantomas. People thought that was going to be this big metal supergroup, and it was not rock at all, was it?
Right.
And so I thought, well, maybe he would want to do like a regular rock band. And I had wanted to play with John Stanier from Helmet for a while. Him and I had been talking.
Yeah, what a great drummer.
I talked to Patton. I said, what would you think about doing something like a rock band with me and John on drums? He said, okay, well, let's get Kevin Rutmanis to play bass. And that's how that happened. And so I just wrote for that, and it was just where my head was at the time. I didn't consciously think, oh, I've got Mike Patton, I've got to try to, write different things. I knew he could sing anything. I knew that he could sing any intervals, any range, whatever. I certainly didn't have to simplify things, but I didn't even think like that. I knew that these guys would be up for doing things with weird timing, but at the same time, he wanted it to be hard and aggressive, but could also be weird, atmospheric, and maybe even cinematic in a way. And those first two albums, it's funny, we never got the critical respect, but they sold a lot more than the Jesus Lizard.
Wow.
Those first two Tomahawk albums. And we toured and went all over the place. And then it just, it kind of wound down after a while. I think we did our most recent album in 2021, 2022, Tonic Immobility. But we haven't played any shows in a while.
Okay.
So, but yeah, that kind of kept it going. And between that and then, I did another hillbilly band, the legendary Shack Shakers.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about that.
I played with them for about 3 years. And that was, we did an album. And I like rockabilly and I like Western swing and I like that stuff. It's a different thing. There's a certain finesse involved. It's a little bit jazzy in a way, but they also have to keep the energy level going. So yeah, being able to go backwards and do the more roots-based music was enjoyable. But then it's like anything else. You do that for a while, you can't wait to get back to the more forward-thinking, modern, music, right?
Yep.
And then you do that for a while, and it's kind of nice to be able to go back, whether it's bebop or Western swing or whatever, to kind of look back at a pre-existing style, because you're not constantly thinking about decisions. You're not.
Absolutely.
A lot of the decisions are already made. Like you need to play with a clean tone or a twangy, maybe slap back and tremolo and reverb.
Right.
Even the way you dress for those gigs, like
I know you gotta.
the decisions are made. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? You're not
The,
wearing yourself out trying to be unique and original all the time. You just know. And if you've got a band leader saying, well, you should wear a Western shirt and this and that, I'm like, okay, cool, I'll do that.
yeah.
You know,
You have parameters.
yeah, they're definitely provide. Here's the set list. Here's this. Just go play.
Right.
It's kind of nice to do that once in a while, but then you're ready to go back. Like, no, I got my own ideas about how things should go.
I'm the same way. There's a lot of people that are musically like they join X band, whatever that band may be, and then they're cool with that for the rest of their lives. And we should all be so lucky. I am in a band that takes up most of my time, and that's great. But I do find myself being sort of musically polyamorous, or
Yeah.
I don't know, a polygamist or whatever. But
Yeah.
and it's the desire is in me to be creative with a lot of different projects. They don't always come up, but
Sure.
man, when you do get that chance, it's almost like running in a field by yourself. Not that the music you're playing is shackled so much, but it is freeing to be able to try to explore other avenues. So now that you're back with Jesus Lizard, well, touring is starting for you guys when? When is it that they're like fully touring?
Well, we start playing shows again. We played a few recently, but September, I think. We're doing a few one-offs here and there, festivals and one-offs. September, October gets a little busier, and then I think December there's a full-on like multi-week tour, like East Coast run.
Wow.
Then into next year. Then next year it gets very busy. UK, West Coast, back to Europe, and we'll see. Maybe Australia,
Wow.
that part of the world. So yeah, but we start playing again in September.
Wow. I'm sure every country's going to want to see you back. How long was the hiatus for you guys? Because you didn't quite break up, but
yeah. Well, we stopped and we all did other things. We all moved. Well, Mac McNeely, the drummer, stayed in the Chicago area in Evanston, but I moved to Nashville. David Sims moved to New York, and David Yao moved to Los Angeles.
All right.
And that's where everyone is still. There was originally a 10-year break from 99 to 2009. And then we started playing again in the teens, like 2017, 2018. So as far as us performing together, there was only that one original 10-year period. And the other time we've been kind of intermittent. But as recording and doing that was going back to, I don't know, 98, 99.
Yeah.
So that was a whole nother thing.
Wow. Well, it's great to have you back. And the stuff is amazing. So I can't wait to see you out there. We're about to go do a whole bunch of festivals. And I was hoping you guys were starting your Eurofest run, because I'm sure that's imminent and coming for you guys.
We'll see.
Yeah, it's always a part of the thing. But yeah, just disappointed that you weren't on these yet. Damn it. So, I always ask everybody, do you have, well, quick. We didn't mention your signature guitar, your electrical guitar company, signature guitar. It's a great looking guitar. Are those still in production? Are those still getting made, or are you still using those?
Yeah. I took a little break from those. So those were all aluminum. Yes, that is my model, humbuckers and all this, Bigsby. Lately, I have been playing a Powers Electric. Are you familiar with the new company?
I don't think I am, which now
Powers,
I'm compelled.
It's West Coast, part of the Taylor company. Andy Powers is a designer at Taylor Guitars.
Okay.
And Taylor is known mostly for their acoustic guitars, which are great. So now he's come out with a line of electric guitars, and they sent me one to try, just to say, what do you think of this? And I said, this is fantastic. The weight, the balance, the tone, the feel, everything. And they said, we'll make you one, And so I've been playing that. The first 3 shows we've played since we've been back, I've been using those. 2 out of 3 were outdoors in hot temperatures. That aluminum expands and contracts a lot with heat and cold and all that. And it affects the tuning a lot. And I've dealt with it on and off for decades.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to take a break from that. And, I'll play them again. I used them all over the album, too.
Sure.
And they sound great. They have a great, unique sound. But I've been kind of enjoying the Powers Electric so far. It just really sounds great and feels great, and has a cool look. And
I'll check them out. I'll definitely check them out. I know that Kevin Burkett from Electrical Guitar Company also started. He got the patent on the original, the Travis Bean guitars from the family and everything. You started making those. Do you have any of those newer reissues?
No, and I don't have any of my old ones either.
No shit.
I had to stop playing them. They were so heavy
Yeah.
and unbalanced. I was always fighting them. And I had neck and shoulder problems, and I just couldn't play them anymore.
Yeah.
And then fighting the temperature stuff with the aluminum. So I sold all mine. I borrowed one of the new ones he made, and I liked it. But once again, just the weight and the balance it throws me off. I can't do it anymore.
Especially when you go and play something like I saw you with a Hamer Strat once. And I imagine going to that was probably like a vacation after playing that Strat.
Well, it depends which one, but that was a problem too, because I had the black Hamer Strat was custom made, and the body was all maple. What was I thinking?
I
wanted it as bright and chunky as possible. So maple body, I think Seymour Duncan hot rails. And yeah, it sounded great, but that was just as heavy.
Yeah.
Only now the weight was the other way. Instead of being the neck, it was the body. And I had the same thing with that. Within a year or so, I'm like, wow, I'm getting physical therapy for my neck and shoulders all the time now. Yeah. I can't play these anymore. So I sold those. So that kind of leads me around. The EGC chessies, those are light. They're semi-hollow, and they're light, and they're well balanced. So that was foremost. The feel was very important, getting that right, and they did. But the Powers electric, those really have a great feel and tone and everything, and they're catching on.
Any pedals?
Yeah. I used to use as little as possible, and then I slowly started working in. I always liked TC electronic stuff. I liked, for a lot of people, that first one, that chorus flange pitch mod pedal. I used that for years, and then I went to the 2290, and I had a couple of those, and then I went to the G-Force, which was my main thing for a while. And in the last few years, I really like the Line 6 Helix.
Yeah.
The big all-in-one. I use it live and in the studio. I've got my Jesus Lizard bank of sounds, your basic clean, chorus, verb, trem, slapback, and the crazy one, delay, and with a slight EQ, and it's very practical, easy to use, sturdy, dependable. Wow. And I used it in the studio too. I even used a little bit of the modeling here and there, just touches of it. Yeah. And no one can tell. I guarantee, if you've heard the record and if you were to guess where that was, you wouldn't know. I'm not afraid of that stuff. I think that it's just another tool to be mixed in with other tools. And, I'm not dependent on it, but I'm not avoiding it either.
I was a naysayer for a long time, and now I'm on a quad Cortex now. I was on a Kemper. Yeah. And, I've always been a Marshall guy. And, man, the Marshall captures they have from the fucking factory without even, profiling your own stuff. It's like we were going to do that with the stuff that I'd been using, and then we kind of listened to their factory captures, and they were so good. Yeah. I was just like, well, what the fuck? Why? I could just go tour with this right now. It's done. It's just this thing,
I saw a few years ago Meshuggah, one of the loudest, heaviest, weirdest bands ever, and they were all using
fractals.
Yeah. And they were, and none of that was going through any amps on stage, and it was just as pulverizing as ever. So
absolutely, no cabs.
I still like having amps on stage. I still like feeling the air.
Sure.
Having a point where that's where it's coming out. But, I'm not against the other. I'm not a purist. I never was.
Yeah. Well, I always ask everybody, is there one that got away? Is there a piece of gear that you lost, maybe got stolen, or you had to hawk or whatever that you wish you still had?
I'm pretty lucky. I don't think I've ever had anything stolen.
Wow.
I'm pretty lucky in all my time and growing up, say, outside of Detroit and then Austin, then west side of Chicago, dodgy sort of rehearsal spaces where you leave it for days at a time unattended and not very much. Even right now in Nashville, I have a practice space that's not in a great area. Well, I leave my Black Stars there.
Yeah.
But I left my Helix there too, and I would be bummed if that. I've never had anything seriously stolen. When I was a teenager, I had a Strat from the 70s, like a 73, 74 Strat that I bought new on sale from a music store. for like, I don't know, $350 back then.
Right.
And it was just a standard mid 70s with the big headstock.
Mm-hmm.
And now those are, I don't know, $5,000, $10,000.
Yeah, sure.
I wish I had that. No, it comes and goes. I don't have anything that really breaks my heart. I've sold things in the past because I had to. Like, I'm doing okay now, but there, you go through periods where maybe your money is getting tight when
Oh,
income is.
sure.
I went through a period where I wasn't working and things were getting canceled, and I'm looking at my amps and I just couldn't justify holding on to it.
Yeah.
And I sold those high watts too. I have a small high watt half stack, a little J, the Jimmy Page
Yeah.
20-watt head, and a 2x12. But I don't have any of the big ones. I had back problems and hernias, and it's like, all right, I can't deal with this anymore.
Yeah.
No, I think the Strat. I had a Strat from the 70s. That's the only one that I really, if I had it, I know I would really play it.
How many Travis Beans did you have in all?
I think I only had three
No
at one
shit.
time. I only had
No shit.
three. If we were on tour, I would usually only bring two guitars at the most.
Sure.
Your main one in the back. I usually didn't switch during the set. And sometimes when we travel, if I'm flying somewhere, I'll just bring one.
You're just taking one.
Maybe I make friends with the other bands, and
Yeah.
I have to borrow something at least. Well, I haven't been a dick.
Yeah.
But no, only three.
Wow.
And I've got three EGCs.
Yeah. At the time, it made me feel like you had a bunch because did you paint the ones that you had? Did you
No.
you never changed
No.
the colors? I remember there was a white one.
Yeah.
And then there was another color. It might have been that one the one you already mentioned.
There
Where I
was the
like,
green. The main one was the green one
right,
that I played for a long time, and it was like that when I bought it.
No shit.
Of course, they were all secondhand, 1990 or so. I had a white one that I bought from Steve Albini, a green one that I bought from this guy Jay Tiller in Wisconsin, and then I had another white one too. But no, I didn't do anything to him.
My brother is in the band The Toadies.
Oh,
They just recently recorded with Steve, which is very terrible and awful and tragic what happened to him. Right before that happened, actually, I think within a week or two after them leaving, he passed. And I went and I always have to be in Chicago, so I went and met him, and he had the Wedge. Of course, he had his own Travis Bean, those models. I can't remember what the model was he played. Yeah, he had the EGC, but doesn't he? Did he not also have a Travis Bean that was like his EGC was based on? It was like a different.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
But the Wedge, I was just like, oh my! I've only ever seen pictures of this fucking guitar. It's insane.
Yeah.
He also had that Zamitis as well, Zamitis or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, Duane, it's now at 45 minutes, and I don't want to take up much more of your time, but I will say congrats on the new record. It's amazing. You're one of my favorite guitar players of all time, and I really appreciate you doing this.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Zach.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having me, man. Warmed my heart. And it's nice to talk with people who are knowledgeable and etc.
I try. And I could keep you here for 3 more hours, but I don't want to punish you.
I'm going to go dig up some Rise Against now.
Okay, you please do. Thank you, sir.
All right, man.
Take care.
Bye.
Again, this podcast just keeps giving back. This thing is nothing if not just a vehicle for me to meet people that I admire and people that I've always wanted to talk to and ask all my dumb, dorky questions to. And everybody's been so gracious and generous with their time and put up with me and humored me, I guess. So I'm very thankful to everyone I've interviewed on here. And I'm very, very thankful to Mr. Duane Denison for giving me his time today. I hope you enjoyed that. I really did. I'm going to leave you with a prime example of Duane Denison's amazing, amazing guitar work. This is a song called Boilermaker. This is off the Liar record by Jesus Lizard. I think the first time I heard this, it blew the top of my head off, and it still does. Listen to this riff. I won't even try to explain it. I've tried to explain these riffs before, but just listen to it. Again, I don't think anyone's ever sounded like this before or since. He continues to be Duane Denison, man, and thank whoever or whatever celestial being for Duane Denison and for the Jesus Lizard. Thank you for putting up with me. Thank you for listening. And thank you to the wonderful folks at Jim Dunlop and MXR Pedals. Find out what they're doing at jimdunlop.com. Thank you to the people at DistroKid for letting you and me and everyone that wants to make music for helping us get our art on the streaming platforms. They're doing great work. Thank you for listening. I'm going to keep doing them, and I'll talk to you soon.